You never really think your own front porch will turn into the center of a dramatic story, but that's exactly what happened to me. It was a normal weekday morning, the kind where the sun comes up slow and you're just trying to go about your routine. But I didn't realize something was about to unfold right outside my door. I had installed cameras around my house mostly for peace of mind, the kind of extra security you don't think you'll ever really need. But those cameras turned out to be the single most important thing I had, because they caught something that could have completely turned my life upside down. The neighbor, Karen, had always been a little strange, but in that way where you can't really put your finger on it. She always had something to complain about, whether it was the sound of kids playing outside or how long you left your trash bin at the curb. You know the type. The neighbor who seems to make it their personal mission to create drama. Still, I had no idea how far she would actually go. That morning, I saw her out of the corner of my eye, walking past my house slower than usual. She kept glancing at my porch almost like she was studying it. I didn't think much of it until later, when the knock on my door came. When I opened it, there she was on the ground, groaning, clutching her ankle like she had just been through a terrible accident. She pointed to my steps, saying she had slipped and fallen hard. Her voice cracked with pain, and her face twisted as if she could barely stand it. I was caught completely off guard. She started demanding to know why I hadn't maintained my porch properly, saying there must have been something wrong with the step, some loose board, something unsafe that had caused her fall. She claimed she was injured badly and needed medical help. But here's the thing. I had just been on that porch minutes before, and everything was perfectly fine. There wasn't a single thing that could have caused anyone to trip or fall. Still, she kept moaning, holding her ankle, glancing up at me with these dramatic expressions that seemed almost too perfect, like a bad performance in a play. My gut told me something wasn't right. She was asking for me to admit fault, to agree that my porch had caused her injury. She said she might need to contact her lawyer, maybe even file a claim against me. And then it hit me. The cameras. I had cameras installed that covered my porch from multiple angles. And if she really had slipped, those cameras would have shown it. The strange thing was, she didn't know about them. They were positioned discreetly, and she wasn't the type to notice small details like that. As she went on about her injury, my mind raced to the footage that had been recording the entire time, but I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I nodded and kept calm, telling her I'd get her some help. But inside, I was thinking, I've got to see what really happened. It was almost too convenient, the way she had just happened to fall exactly on my property, in full view of anyone who might come by. The more she exaggerated her pain, the more I started to feel this sinking suspicion that she wasn't hurt at all. She was faking it, and she thought I was gullible enough to believe her. I remember the way she looked at me when I didn't immediately apologize. It was this sharp, accusing glare, like she was daring me to challenge her story. She shifted on the ground a little too quickly for someone who was supposedly in excruciating pain. At one point, she even forgot to hold the same ankle she had been grabbing moments before. The whole performance was sloppy, but the problem was if I didn't have proof. Her word against mine could cause real trouble. As I stood there watching her, I realized just how far some people will go to manipulate a situation. She wanted money, compensation, maybe even to drag me into court with a lawsuit. And if I didn't have something solid to protect myself, she could succeed. That's when I excused myself for a moment, told her I'd get some water, and slipped inside. My heart was pounding as I pulled up the live camera feed on my phone. What I saw made my jaw drop. The footage showed her walking up to my porch, pausing, looking around carefully, like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. Then, clear as day, she lowered herself slowly onto the step, sat down for a second, and then dramatically threw herself sideways onto the ground. It was like watching a bad actor rehearse for a scene. No stumble, no accident, no real fall. Just a staged act designed to make it look like she had been injured. Right then, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Karen wasn't hurt. She wasn't even clumsy. She was scheming, and she thought she had me right where she wanted me. But she didn't know the cameras had caught everything, every single detail of her performance, from the way she carefully placed herself on the porch to the exaggerated cries she made afterward. And as I watched that footage, part of me was furious, but another part of me felt almost relieved, because now I had the truth on my side, and there was no way she could twist it. I walked back outside, calmer than before, because I knew I held the evidence that could change everything. She was still lying there, still groaning, still holding her ankle like she was on the verge of fainting. And she had no idea that her little plan had just unraveled completely. When I stepped back outside, she looked up at me with this pitiful expression, as if she expected me to be panicking over her so-called injury. I held a bottle of water in my hand and passed it to her, watching the way she reached for it without any sign of actual pain. For someone who claimed to have twisted her ankle so badly, her movements were suspiciously smooth. She winced for effect, letting out this exaggerated sigh, and then said I needed to take responsibility before things got worse for me. I crouched down beside her and asked her to explain exactly how it happened. She started rambling about a crack in the wood, about how I hadn't maintained my porch, how she was just walking by and suddenly went flying down the step. It was almost amusing to hear her spin the story while I knew the truth was already saved in my camera feed. I kept my face neutral, nodding like I was listening carefully, but deep down I was thinking, "You've played the wrong game this time." She started talking about medical bills, about how injuries like this could have long-term effects. She even slipped in a line about knowing a lawyer who specializes in property injuries. Every word out of her mouth was like a carefully rehearsed script, designed to make me sweat and give in. But instead of panicking, I decided to push back a little. I asked her which foot was hurt, and she blurted out, "My right ankle," without hesitation. The problem was, just 10 minutes earlier, she had been clutching her left one in agony. The moment I pointed this out, she froze for a split second, and then quickly switched, grabbing her right ankle as if she had simply misspoken. That was the first crack in her act, and I could see the frustration flicker across her face. She was realizing I wasn't as easy to manipulate as she hoped. Still, she didn't back down. Instead, she tried to ramp up the drama, groaning louder, telling me I needed to call for medical help immediately, warning me that ignoring her injury could land me in even bigger trouble. I pretended to be concerned and told her to wait while I checked something inside. I walked back in, but instead of calling anyone, I pulled up the footage again and replayed it. Watching her fake fall was almost surreal. I couldn't believe she thought this would actually work. It was clear evidence of a scam, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. She was willing to ruin my reputation, maybe even cost me thousands of dollars, all because she wanted to fake an accident. When I returned, she was still lying there, now tapping her fingers impatiently on the porch. The fake moaning had grown quieter, almost like she was bored waiting for me to cave in. That's when I decided to test her. I said, "Karen, you know, it's strange because my porch is in perfect condition. I was just standing here earlier. Are you sure you didn't just trip on your own shoelace?" Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned sharp. She insisted she knew what happened, that it was my porch, and that I was clearly at fault. She even threatened to take me to court right then and there if I didn't accept responsibility. That's when I leaned a little closer and quietly said, "You might want to rethink your story, because I have cameras installed and they caught every second of what just happened." Her face went pale instantly. The bravado slipped away, and for the first time she looked genuinely nervous. She stammered, trying to laugh it off, asking what I meant, but I didn't flinch. I told her flat out that I had video proof showing her lowering herself onto the porch, pretending to fall, and then acting out her fake injury. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. She stopped moaning. She stopped holding her ankle. She just stared at me, her lips pressed tight like she was scrambling to think of what to say next. Finally, she muttered something about me misunderstanding, that she might have been disoriented, that maybe she overreacted. But the act was over. And we both knew it. I didn't let her off easy, though. I told her I was saving the footage, that if she tried anything, whether it was calling a lawyer or filing a false claim, I would hand it directly to the authorities. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she slowly pulled herself up, brushed off her clothes, and muttered that she'd be fine. Suddenly, the limp was gone. She walked away, no sign of injury at all, disappearing back toward her house without another word. I stood there on the porch, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over me. Relief because I had undeniable proof, and disbelief because she really thought this scam would succeed. It made me realize how dangerous people like her could be. Without those cameras, without that footage, I might have been dragged into a long, expensive legal battle. It would have been her word against mine. And who knows how it might have turned out. But as I watched her leave, I also knew this wasn't really over. Someone like Karen doesn't just give up after one failed attempt. She had exposed what she was willing to do, and I had to be prepared in case she tried again. So I decided to keep the footage safe, stored on multiple devices, ready in case. I needed it. And deep down, I started to wonder, was she doing this to me alone? Or had she tried pulling the same trick on other neighbors before? The thought sent a chill through me. Maybe this wasn't her first staged accident. Maybe she had already gotten away with it somewhere else. And maybe, just maybe, I was the first one to catch her in the act. That night, I sat down at my computer and replayed the footage over and over again. Every time I watched Karen lowering herself onto my porch like some actor in a bad play, I grew more convinced she had done this before. The way she clutched, her ankle, the way she exaggerated her voice, even the little details like how she checked her surroundings before pretending to fall. It all felt practiced. She didn't seem like someone who made a mistake in the moment. She seemed like someone who had rehearsed a performance. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. What if she had already scammed other people in the neighborhood? What if she had sued someone and walked away with a big payout? That would explain the confidence she had when threatening me. It wasn't just a bluff. It was experience. I realized that keeping this to myself might not be enough. If she had a history of pulling stunts like this, others deserved to know. The next morning, I took a walk around the neighborhood. A few of my neighbors were out, tending to their lawns or taking out trash. I casually brought up Karen in conversation, careful not to sound like I was gossiping, just curious. To my surprise, one of them immediately rolled their eyes and muttered, "Oh, her again." Another neighbor chimed in and told me she had once accused them of leaving dangerous debris on the sidewalk after she nearly tripped walking her dog. She had demanded they pay for new shoes, claiming the soles were ruined. Someone else said she had shown up at their door complaining of smoke damage from a backyard barbecue and hinting that she might need compensation for cleaning her clothes. It all started to click. Karen wasn't just unlucky or dramatic. She had a pattern. She thrived on creating problems where none existed, always hinting at legal trouble, always demanding money or favors. My so-called accident wasn't unique. It was just the latest version of her game. That realization both infuriated me and gave me a strange sense of power. For once, I had undeniable proof of her behavior, something she couldn't talk her way out of. Later that afternoon, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, there she was, standing upright, perfectly fine, not a hint of a limp. She had this stiff smile on her face like she was trying to play nice. She said she wanted to clear the air, that maybe things got out of hand the other day. She claimed she wasn't planning on taking legal action, as long as we could agree it was just a misunderstanding. Her tone was polite, but her eyes betrayed her frustration. She was fishing, trying to see how much I would admit or how nervous I was. I didn't let her control the moment. I calmly told her I had saved multiple copies of the footage and that I had already shown it to a few neighbors. The instant I said that, her expression changed. The fake friendliness drained from her face, replaced by anger. She snapped, accusing me of trying to make her look bad, warning me I could be in trouble for spreading lies. But I didn't flinch. I told her there were no lies. The footage spoke for itself. I even offered to play it for her right there on my phone. She didn't take me up on the offer. Instead, she scoffed, muttered something about people not minding their own business, and stormed off. In that moment, I knew I had won, but I also knew she wouldn't forgive me for it. Karen wasn't the type to let go of her schemes easily. She thrived on drama, on finding cracks in people's defenses, and she hated being exposed. I could feel the tension lingering in the air long after she walked away, like a storm that hadn't quite passed. For the next few days, I kept a close eye on my cameras, checking the live feed every so often just to be sure. She didn't come back to my porch. But I noticed her pacing outside more often than usual, glancing toward my house like she was plotting her next move. Instead of fear, though, I felt strangely calm. Because this time, I wasn't vulnerable. I wasn't just a target. I was ready. And here's the thing. Sometimes the scariest people aren't strangers in the dark or burglars breaking in. Sometimes they're the ones who live right next door, smiling in public while plotting in private. Karen wanted me to play the part of her victim, but instead I exposed her. I showed her that lies don't stand a chance when the truth is caught on camera. Taxio. The end, I didn't need to file a complaint or call the police, though I still kept that option open. The real victory was making sure she knew I wasn't someone she could manipulate. She had to live with the fact that I held the evidence, that I had outsmarted her in her own game. And maybe, just maybe, knowing she was exposed would make her think twice before trying it again with someone else. But if she didn't learn, if she ever tried to pull another fake injury stunt on me or anyone else, I'd be ready. The cameras were always watching, always recording, always one step ahead of her lies. And that, more than anything, was my safety net. So if you're ever wondering whether having cameras is worth it, remember this story. Without mine, I might have been buried in legal headaches, drained of money, and smeared with blame for something I never did. But with them, I had the truth in my corner. And in a world where people like Karen exist, that truth can mean the difference between being a victim and standing your ground. Because in the end, lies can only survive in the shadows. Once the light hits them, once the camera captures them, the whole act falls apart. And Karen learned that lesson the hard way, on My Porch, in full view of the lens with nowhere left to hide.